All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, after a rough start to Sam Darnold's NFL career, the former first round pick found new life in 2024 as the starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. Darnold, had himself a very productive 1 year in Minnesota as he threw 35 touchdowns and helped the Vikings win 14 games. Now, you knew that Darnold, and I talked about this, okay? I talked about this last season. You knew he was going to cash in this offseason because of the season that he had, as well as the fact that, you know what? The market out there for starting quarterbacks in the NFL is slim pickings. Okay. So you knew Darnold was going to cash in, and the Seattle Seahawks saw enough from Darnold to give him a 3-year deal today for $110.5 million, with 55 million of that being guaranteed. And if you're Seattle, it's simply out with the old and in with the new, because we have seen the Seahawks be very busy recently as far as their roster. A couple of days ago, they traded quarterback Geno Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders for a third round pick. They also traded wide receiver DK Metcalf to the Pittsburgh Steelers and released longtime wide receiver Tyler Lockett, as these were just some of the moves that have recently been made by the Seahawks. But as you look at Sam Darnold and you look at the fact that Seattle has given him the keys to the franchise, at least for the next couple of years, you have to wonder, has he turned a corner as a starting NFL quarterback, or is this going to be another Rob Johnson, Scott Mitchell type scenario for the Seahawks? And of course, anybody who remembers two of the biggest flops in free agency at the quarterback position have to be Rob Johnson going to the Bills, and then Scott Mitchell going to the Detroit Lions. But you look at Sam Darnold last year and you ask yourself, was he simply a product of Kevin O'Connell's system with the Minnesota Vikings and throwing the football to Justin Jefferson? I say this because, Darnold started off very strong last year for the Minnesota Vikings, but those last two games, which were two critical games for Minnesota, which they both lost, they had an opportunity to beat the Lions in week number 18 and win the NFC North and get a first round bye. The Vikings and Darnold looked terrible in that game. And of course, the Vikings lost. And then in the wild card round game against the Los Angeles Rams, if you thought that Darnold looked bad against the Detroit Lions, he looked even worse against the Los Angeles Rams, as the Vikings were one and done in the postseason. Honestly, in those last two games, Minnesota was outscored by their opponents 58-16. And in those games, Sam Darnold only managed to throw one touchdown pass while he was sacked 11 times, and nine of those came against the Rams in the wild card round. But nonetheless, like I said, it's a slim market for quarterbacks this offseason. And to Darnold's credit, he was able to cash in for it. Like I said, you have to wonder if he turned the corner, because you look at those first couple of years with the New York Jets, they weren't pretty. Okay. In 3 years with the Jets, Darnold was just 13-25 as a starter. He threw 45 touchdowns and 39 interceptions, and he completed under 60% of his passes. But the Jets simply were not a good football team. They threw him to the Wolves right away back in 2018. He started to show some flashes of getting it together, working with Matt Rule in his brief time with the Carolina Panthers, and then, of course, being a backup to Brock Purdy with the San Francisco 49ers back in 2023. I think Sam Darnold went to the Vikings, and you know what? He knew that he was playing with house money. They had just drafted J.J. McCarthy in the first round last year. Of course, McCarthy had that knee injury in his first preseason appearance. That shelved him for the entire year. So it was Sam Darnold's job from there on out. But I thought that it was a perfect scenario for Darnold. It was a comfortable system for him. with Kevin O'Connell. On top of that, you're throwing the football to arguably the best wide receiver in the National Football League in Justin Jefferson. And the cherry on top of that Sunday is the fact that the Vikings play indoors. Perfect elements for Sam Darnold, and there was zero pressure on him there. Now you're going to Seattle, and there's going to be expectations based off of the dollar figure that you're getting. But at the same time, Seattle only gave Sam Darnold a 3-year deal. This wasn't a 6 or 7 year deal that they're going to commit to him long term. No, they're giving him 3 years to figure this thing out. And I think, there's still a lot of questions for me with Sam Darnold. I mean, I look at the fact that you go from playing in quote unquote perfect conditions for the Minnesota Vikings indoors to now you're going to be playing up there in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. And come November and December and January, it can get nasty up there weather wise in that region of the country. The other big thing for me with Sam Darnold is who are the Seahawks going to surround him with? I know that they still have Jackson Smith and Jingba at wide receiver, and I feel like that young man has not even gotten close to touching his talent as far as what he can do. We saw them get a three back for Geno Smith from the Raiders. We saw them get a pick back, and I'm talking about the Seahawks from the Steelers for DK Metcalf. Of course, Seattle has to utilize those picks, and I think it's all about putting a team around Sam Darnold going forward. The Seahawks did not run the football effectively last year. That has got to change. Like I said before, you have talent in one Jackson Smith and Jingba. He had 100 receptions last year, more than 1,100 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. But he also had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett in the receiving core as well. Like I said the other day when I talked about this with Geno Smith going to the Raiders, it's one of those where if you're Seattle, you probably reached your apex, or you feel like you reached your apex with Geno Smith and company, and you felt like you weren't going to go any further. On top of that, all of those guys that I mentioned were brought in by former head coach Pete Carroll and not current head coach Mike McDonald. Clearly, things are changing in a different direction. And if you are Seattle, you don't make the move to go out there and bring in a Sam Darnold or get rid of a Geno Smith, rather, if you don't know that you can't go out there and get yourself a Sam Darnold who is clearly somebody that they wanted. I'm going to say like this for Sam Darnold, because some people are going to say, well, did the Seahawks make the right move moving on from Sam Darnold? And it's kind of funny in the sense that, you know what, once again, you got a Sam Darnold going out there and, following the trend behind Geno Smith. I know that Geno Smith had already left the Jets by the time that Sam Darnold had gotten there. I think he was with the Giants briefly, and I also think the Chargers before he landed in Seattle. But now you've got this quarterback carousel, if you will, in the Pacific Northwest involving two former Jet quarterbacks. Of course, once upon a time, Geno Smith was a second round pick of the Jets. And of course, Sam Darnold was taken top five by the New York Jets in 2018. But nonetheless, Sam Darnold is 6 or 7 years younger than Geno Smith. Again, it's only a 3-year deal with half of the money guaranteed. So it's not a big risk if you are the Seattle Seahawks. This is not us, meaning the Seahawks, giving Sam Darnold a $200 million deal for 5 years being fully guaranteed. I think a guy like Deshaun Watson and what has not happened with the Cleveland Browns has really hindered that market for quarterbacks going forward, unless you are the elite of the elite, like a Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen in that company. So it's one of those where they paid Sam Darnold, but they didn't pay Sam Darnold, if you understand what I'm saying in regards to the Seattle Seahawks. I think, again, they feel like they got as far as they could with Geno Smith and company. And honestly, to his credit, Geno Smith, I think, as a starting quarterback of the Seahawks, overachieved. Okay, because nobody expected him to do what he did. The ceiling was very low as far as the expectations went, and Geno Smith clearly exceeded that as he was the guy after Russell Wilson. Now let's see if they can build around Sam Darnold, because like I said before, you're not going to ask a Sam Darnold to put a team on his back and go out there and win. That's not going to happen. But one thing you've got to do if you're Seattle, you've got to work on that offensive line. You've got to work on that run game. Why? Because Sam Darnold is not a mobile quarterback. And on top of that, Sam Darnold, throughout his career, whether he was playing with good teams or bad teams, does not do good with pressure. You look at the pass rush that the Rams put on Sam Darnold in that wild card game just 2 months ago. Now you've got to face that same Rams defense if you were Sam Darnold twice a year if you're going to get out of the NFC West and get to the postseason. All right. You still got to deal with the San Francisco 49ers, a very formidable pass rush as well. And then we just saw the Arizona Cardinals go out there and sign former Philadelphia Eagles defensive end Josh Sweat today. So, nonetheless, if you are the Seahawks, you've got to shore up that run game to protect Sam Darnold. And you also have to go out there and work on your offensive line. I think those are two key moves for the Seahawks as this offseason progresses. And nonetheless, if you're Darnold, like I always say, a run game is a quarterback's best friend, especially when you're talking about having to deal with the rain and all of the elements in Seattle as the season progresses. So I'm going to leave this as an incomplete as far as the Seahawks' decision to go with Sam Darnold. I think it has the potential to work, but it's going to come down to who do the Seahawks put around Sam Darnold. If you're going to go out there and ask him, you know what, put this team on your back and lead us to the promised land, it ain't going to happen. But if it's something where you know what, you put the right guys around Sam Darnold, you work on that offensive line, you work on the run game, maybe bringing in a tight end and another wide receiver. These are things that the Seahawks are going to have to do. He has a live arm, and he can be effective when he's protected, and he can be effective when the right people are around him. So let's see what the Seattle Seahawks go forward and how they approach this. They've invested somewhat in Sam Darnold, but like I said before, that investment won't amount to a hill of beans if they don't put the proper people around him. But nonetheless, it's the Sam Darnold show in Seattle going forward. But folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.